Hi guys, and welcome back to the Sun Devil Learning Lab. This is Mrs. Lopez. I'll be teaching you today. We're going to be learning about the least common multiple, so we're going to go over that. If you are new to the Sun Devil Learning Lab, then welcome. And if you are returning and you've seen previous videos, then welcome back and let's get started. Let me share my screen here with you real quick. Okay, so we're going to be doing the least common multiple. As always, we're going to go over our agenda today and then our objectives, and then we're going to get started. So I want you to grab your materials, your paper, and your pencil, and pause your video for 2 minutes if you haven't grabbed your materials, and then we'll get started. Okay, welcome back. And we also have a joke, and well, it's more of a quote, but math is the only place where people buy 64 watermelons and no one ever wonders why. It's always confusing when you read those equations, but no one ever asks why. And also our objectives is I can find the multiples of a number, and I can find the least common multiple of two numbers. In our previous video, we were finding the greatest common factor. So if you haven't watched the previous video, I would advise you to watch the previous video on the greatest common factor because this will also help you find also the least common multiple. So before we get started, I really want you to think, and I'm going to read this to you, and then we're going to think about it. So if hot dogs are sold in bags of 8 and buns are sold in bags of 12, what is the least number of bags of hot dogs and buns that I can buy to have one hot dog for every one bun? So this is where the least common multiple comes into play. I'm going to show you how I would solve this, and this will also be an introduction to the lesson. So what I'm going to do is make a T-chart, and I'm going to find the multiples of 8. So when I multiply 8 times 1, I get 8. 8 times 2, I get 16. And 8 times 3, I get 24. So now I'm going to find the multiples of the bags of buns. So 12 times 1 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. So I'm going to stop at that point because I see there's two numbers that are very similar, 24 and 24. What that means is that I'm going to have 3 bags of buns and also I'm going to have 3 bags of hot dogs and 2 bags of buns. And that will make it so I can have every hot dog has 1 bun because there's going to be 24 hot dogs at this point and 24 buns at this point. This is really our introduction to the lesson. We're going to go over our vocabulary and then get started. So our vocabulary. Our first word is multiple. A multiple of a number is the product of that number and any whole number greater than 0. So that's what we did. We did 8 times 1, 8 times 2, 8 times 3, and so on to find the multiples of 8 and also 12. Our next common number or our next vocabulary word is going to be common multiples. That's where multiples that 2 or more numbers share. In the previous example, 24 is a common multiple between 8 and 12. And the least common multiple. The least multiple that 2 or more numbers share. We can use a Venn diagram or a T-chart to categorize the multiples and common multiples of 2 numbers. So the least common multiple is the first common multiple that 2 numbers share. And we'll see more in further videos and further slides that we have in our lesson that really show the example of least common multiple. So the first way that I'm going to do is let's find the first 10 multiples of 3 and 4, and that's going to help us find our least common multiple. Okay, So I'm going to make a T-chart, and I'm going to list the first 10 multiples of 3 and 4. So 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12, and so on until I get my 10 multiples. 3 times 10 is 30. We're going to find the first 10 multiples of 4. So 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 3 is 12, and all the way until we get our first 10 multiples. 4 times 10 is 40. So if we're looking at our T-chart, we're going to find the numbers that are the common multiples between these two numbers. So if I'm going through the numbers, I see 12 is common, and also 24 is common. So now we have to find the least common multiple for these two numbers. That's going to be the first multiples right there, 12. 12 is our least common multiple between 3 and 4. Okay, so now I'm going to show you another way to find the least common multiple, but this time we're going to be using our factor trees and Venn diagrams. So we have 3 and we have 4, and we're going to put that on our Venn diagram. And then I have a factor tree. So we have 3 and we have 4. Well, there are no factors of 3 because 3 could only be divided by 1 and itself. So that is already its prime factor. Well, 4 can be broken down to 2 times 2. So these are going to be our factors, our prime factors. And we're going to put them in the Venn diagram. So 3 and 2 times 2. We don't have anything in the middle because there's nothing similar between these two numbers. 3 times 1 is 3 and 2 times 2 is 4. There's nothing similar. They're not multiples of each other, so they're going to be separated. But in order to find the least common multiple, we have to multiply all of these numbers together. So we have 3 times 2 times 2, and that's going to give us 12, which is also our least common multiple that we found in the T-chart. So our least common multiple is 12 because we have to multiply the factors, the prime factors together. 3 times 2 times 2. Okay, so I'm going to show you another way. Well, it's the same way. I'm just going to show you another problem, and it's an I do. I've already done the first 10 multiples. So now that we look at this, I found the first 10 multiples of 5 and the first 10 multiples of 10. Now I'm looking at these numbers, and they have a lot of numbers that are in common. We have 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Those are common multiples in between these two numbers, 5 and 10. But we have to find the least common multiple. So pause the video, or I'm going to pause for a moment, and then you're going to figure out which one is the least common multiple. If you said 10, you are correct. 10 is the least common multiple. That is the first number, that is the first multiples that those two numbers have in common. 10 is going to be our least common multiple. Now, let's do it the second way by doing the Venn diagram. So first I'm going to do my factor tree in order to find the factors of these numbers, and this will help me find my multiples, my least common multiple. So we have 5, that is a prime number. That one doesn't factor out, but 10 does. 10 does factor into 2 times 5. So those are going to be our factors. But if you notice, 5 and 5, they're the same number. So you only have to put 5 one time in the Venn diagram, and that's going to be in the middle because they're the same number. They have that number in common. So then we're going to multiply 2 times 5, and that's going to give us 10, and that is our least common multiple that we found out in our T-chart. So now we're going to do a we do. So we're going to find the multiples of 60 and 144. I know these numbers are big and it's going to be okay to find the multiples. All you have to do is do your multiplication or add 60 to the previous number or 144 to the previous number. So pause the video now for 5 to 10 minutes to find these multiples of 144 and 60 in order to find what our common multiple is going to be between those two numbers. Okay, welcome back. So now that you've found your multiples, I'm going to list them for you just to make sure that we have them right. And I want you to verify them on your paper and see if you got the same numbers that I did. So for 60, these are our multiples of 60. I went up to 720. And then our multiples of 144, I went up to 1,728. So now looking at these two numbers, I see one number that is common between those two. So circle the one number that you see common between those two, and then we'll come back. Okay, now that you circled that number that you should have circled is 720. 720 is the common multiple between 60 and 144. So now we're going to do the Venn diagram again. So this time I want you to do your factor tree of 60 and 144. Pause the video for 5 minutes to do your factor tree. Okay, now that you're back and you've already done your factor tree, now we're going to find the factors of 60 and 144. So these are my factors of 60. 2, 2, 5, and 3. Those are going to be my factors of 60. And then my factors of 144 are going to be 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, and 3. Now looking at these numbers, we know that 2, 2, and 3 are common factors between those numbers, so those are going to go in the middle of our Venn diagram. And then the other factors are going to go in their own section. So 5 is going to be over here, and the other 2 and other 2 and 3 are going to be on this side. These are the numbers that they have in common. So now in order to find our least common multiple, we need to multiply all of these factors together. So pause the video, multiply the factors, and then we'll come back so we can see if our answer is true. Okay, so now that you've multiplied them all together, I multiplied them out and I got 720 because 3 times 3 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 5 is 720. That is going to be our least common multiple. This way, with the Venn diagram and the t-chart is going to be, in the factor tree, this is going to be an easier way to find the least common multiple of bigger numbers because doing a t-chart is going to take way too much time to write out the numbers. If they're smaller numbers, that's okay, use your t-chart. But if we're doing bigger numbers like 60 and 144, let's do the Venn diagram to do this. So now it's your turn. Let's find the multiples of 50 and 80. Pause the video, find those multiples of 50 and 80, and then we'll come back. Okay, now that you found your multiples, you should have gotten something like this. These are the multiples of 50 and the multiples of 80. Now circle your numbers that they have in common. Okay, if you circled 400, you're correct. That is also going to be your least common multiple. 400 is the least common multiple between 50 and 80. So now let's find our multiples. Do your factor trees of 50 and 80 to test out and make sure that 400 is the least common multiple between these two numbers. Okay, now that you've done your factors, you should have gotten something like this. And then you should have inputted your factors that you've gotten into your Venn diagram and should have gotten something like this. And when we multiply all of these factors together, we should have gone 400. 400 is our least common multiple between these two numbers, so you are correct. So this time you're going to have more problems to do on your own, but I'm not going to break down the steps for you when we get to the answers. So here are your more problems. It is a multiple choice, so just write down the letters that you believe are the least common multiple between the numbers. So the first one is, what is the least common multiple of 6 and 8? A2, B12, C24, or D48? Pause the video if you need to work this out. Okay, so what is the least common multiple between 6 and 8? If you answered C24, you are correct. Okay, our next question is, what is the least common multiple of 6 and 9? A9, B36, C6, or D72? Pause the video to work this problem out. Okay, if you answered B36, you are correct. So what is the least common multiple of 4 and 5? A40, B60, C1, or D20? Pause the video to work out this problem, and then we'll come back with the final answer. Okay, so if you said D20, you are correct. So we're going to have more practice, and you could practice those with quizzes and math games. You can get these links through your learning guide. And our objectives, again, where I can find the multiple of a number, which we did with our T-charts. And I can find the least common multiple of two numbers, which we've done with our T-charts, our Venn diagrams, and also our factor trees, multiplying out our factors. So I hope you guys had a good lesson with the least common multiple, and come back for future lessons that we're going to have as well. And I hope you guys have a good day.